We're continuing the Maamar, Vayidaber Elekim is kol advarim ha'ela leimor anoichi, that the Rebbe said on Shavuos Tafshin Chavches and was Magia in honor of Shavuos of the year Tafshin Memtes. In this particular Maamar, the Rebbe is generally discussing the idea of klal and prat. The Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe, when explaining this pasuk Vayidaber Elekim is kol advarim ha'ela leimor, explains that the Aseres Hadibrois, when Hashem spoke, it really includes everything that will ever be said in Torah. This is a bit similar also to what Rashi says, that the Aseres Hadibrois themselves was said in the way of klal or prat, in the sense that we first had all of the Dibrois said together by Hashem, and then they were said individually and separately. So the Rebbe is discussing this idea of the Torah coming first in the way of klal, and then in the way of prat. In a similar way, says the Rebbe, the Asara Maamar, the 10 sayings with which Hashem created the world, also works in a similar way. Because we have, on the one hand, the world is created by Asara Maamar. The Mishnah says, the world could have been created through one saying, which, as Chassidus explains, doesn't only mean it could have been created, but that in a general way, the first initial aspect of the world was in fact created through the first saying of Bereshis, and then come all of the details. Just like it is regarding the Asara Maamaris themselves, the Rebbe explains, so too in regards to the Spherois, that they too work in a similar way, where you have the Oir of Hashem, the light and energy of Hashem, first coming in a general way, and then coming down in more pratim and more details. Within this itself, the Rebbe showed this on a number of different levels, all the way going back to the initial Ratzain of Hashem before the Tzimtzum to create the world, etc. They have the same idea. They have this idea of klal uprat, and that Hashem has this Ratzain for the world, and then the details of the world, and so on and so forth. In this Maamar, the Rebbe is asking why the need, both in the area of Torah as well as in creating the world, the need for this idea of klal and prat. And the Rebbe explains it based on a mashal of a Rav teaching a Talmud a matter of seichel. And the Chazal tell us that a person should always teach to his Talmud b'derech tzara, in a short and concise way. The Rebbe explains that what this means is that we have originally the Rav as his seichel that's completely beyond anything that he could give over to the Talmud. Out of all of this seichel that the Rav has that is really beyond the Talmud, he's going to take one idea, one nekuda, so he's moving everything else aside. He's going to take one idea. This is going to be the klal. This is going to be the basic point that he's going to give over to the Talmud. But this itself is going to have to then come down into all the pratim. And he gives it over first as a klal, as a general point, and then later breaks it down into all of the details that will come out. This itself, the Rebbe says, happens in two ways. First of all, within the Rav himself, he needs to do it inside of his own mind, first taking the klal that he will give over, and then the details, and also as he's giving it over to the Talmud as well. And the Nimshal, says the Rebbe, is in a similar way when the Eibishter is creating the world. You originally have the Oir Ein Sof, which is completely unlimited and beyond the world completely, and then we're going to take this oir and going to make it in a way that it should be able to be first a klal. So we're going to be removing most of the oir and allowing one general point that will be able to then come down into the details to create all of the different aspects of the world. In Seif Hey of the Maamar, which is where we're up to, the Rebbe is now going to start looking at on this mashal of the Rav and Talmud, how seemingly it doesn't fully answer the question of why it needs to work like this when we're speaking about Hashem creating the world. Says the Rebbe in CFA, we need to understand, seemingly, mashal the Rav and Talmud, this mashal that we gave of a teacher and a student, is not really the same as the nimshal, as when we're speaking about the energy of Hashem coming into the world. The Beha mashal, because in the case of the parable, the mashal of the Rav and Talmud, Harizeh sheyesh no seichel harav shalamayla migeder hashpal leTalmud hu inyan shemitzad harav atzmoi v'loy b'shvil hashpal leTalmud. What's happening by the Rav and Talmud? Why is there a need first to remove most of the oir or most of the seichel of the Rav before giving anything to the Talmud? Because the Rav on his own has plenty of deep ideas and deep intellect, which is totally unrelated to anything that he's planning to give over to the Talmud. And therefore, first of all of that needs to be removed. He's now going to leave over one general idea that he does think and feel he could share with the Talmud, and this he's later going to give over, as we said, first the klal and then the pratim, etc. But when we speak about Hashem, harikol hagiluyim, every single level of the greatest forms of Hashem's oir and energy and light, etc. Gam hagiluyim achinailim, even the highest ones. Koilul gam ha'oir shebevchinas giluya etzem. Shalamaylo gam me'aklal orishan hashayich la'oilamis aliyas haratzoin. So earlier on in the Maamar, when the Rebbe was discussing the various different levels within the oir of Hashem and all the way up to the first klal, the Rebbe spoke about the idea that you have the oir of Hashem that is going to be somewhat related to the worlds, which the Rebbe calls over the klal rishon, the first klal, where the aliyas haratzin takes place, where there is a desire that takes place to create the world. And what we said was, there's the oir, the light, the energy of Hashem, it's called, the Rebbe is calling it the giluya etzem, the revelation of the very essence, which is even higher than this oir that's going to be shayach to the worlds. But, says the Rebbe, even that original oir, as opposed to the case of the Rav and the Talmud, the Rav has it on his own, and it's just a matter of moving it aside so he can enable there to be some sort of seichel that's going to be shayach to the Talmud. By Hashem, any oir, even the highest form of oir, which is seemingly beyond anything else, is only in order that eventually from this oir, after many different stages and levels and contractions, we're going to end up with the world and the asara mamoris of the world. This is what the Rebbe says, Hu b'chdei she'achar kach yumshechu mimenu ayidei ribui tzimtzumim, that from this oir eventually will come down, after many levels and many contractions, ha'asara ma'amoris shebehem nivra olam, the 10 sayings with which Hashem creates the world. In other words, like this. Again, by the Rav, we're speaking about, the Rav has a great seichel, and some of that is not shayach to the Talmud at all. So he's going to remove most of that seichel in order to get to the klal and then the pratim, etc. But by Hashem, any oir that exists, Hashem is only causing that oir to be, because clearly, as the Rebbe points out in the footnotes over here as well, by Hashem, there's no such thing as b'derech hechrich. There's no such thing that there's a certain oir that has to be there, and therefore we must remove this oir to get down to the world. Any oir that's there originally is so that from this oir, eventually, through many levels, we're going to get down to the asara ma'amoris through which our world is created. If that's the case, then who needs that original oir to be in that strong, intense way to start with, so that we will then get to the klolim and the pratim, etc.? Why don't we just lechatchila start off with the oir that's needed in this world? That's what the Rebbe is asking now. Why can't Hashem just start off right from the beginning, from the outset, with the 10 sayings for the world? The Rebbe explains the problem. The biur hanal ala tzorech dikdimas haklal hapratim. This explanation that we gave from the Rav and the Talmud is that we first have the klal, the general idea, and then there will be the details. It's once it was established already that you have an oir that's completely higher than having any connection to the oilamos. And it was decided that it's from this oir that something is going to be needed to be drawn down for the purpose of the oilamos. So now, once that's established, so we say, okay, fine, it can't come directly from that highest oir. So we now need to contract it to a certain extent. We're going to have to get to the klal and then to the pratim, etc. In the square brackets now. The kivan shal urshal if yerech ha'oilamos nimshach mea urshal amayla mishaychas loilamos. Since the oir that is going to be somewhat connected to the oilamos, the way Hashem set it up is that oir is coming from the oir that's higher than the oilamos. That's why the order is similar to the Rav and Talmud. At first it comes in the way of a klal, which is already limiting the oir to a certain extent, removing most of the oir, or a big part of the oir, and leaving one idea or one oir, one energy that's going to be given over canal. And then from the klal will come down the pratim, etc. But again, that's only after it was established that we first have an oir that's completely higher than the oilamos. Aval Einim moving, but what's not understood is the Kivan Sha'akavana b'amtsoas ha'or shel ha'mayil b'shaychas lo'elamis. If the whole point of that original bleakful oil, the oil that's completely beyond the worlds, is only that from that oil we're then going to come down to an oil that is going to be somewhat connected to the worlds, until finally being able to get it down to the Asara Ma'amaris with which the world is created, so why couldn't we just go straight from the outset, straight to the Asara Ma'amaris? So again, just to summarize and to clarify this paragraph, what the Rebbe is asking is, in the case of a Rav, the only reason he can't start off with the details to the Talmud, and why he goes first to the Klal and then to the Prat, is because he first started off with something completely, let's call it bleakful, something completely unrelatable to the Talmud, and therefore there are these stages that you need to narrow it down until you get to what he can go into the Talmud. In the case of the Oyer of Hashem, however, the whole point is the Asara Ma'amar is creating the world with that limited, finite Oyer that's coming into the world. So who needs that original Oyer to be there in the first place, so that you'll have this issue that you need to narrow it down and break it down until you can get to the Asara Ma'amaris. So the Rebbe starts the explanation in Seif Vav. The explanation goes as follows. In order for Hashem's reason for the creation to be fulfilled. And what is that reason? What's the purpose? That the creations down here, a yid down here, through avodah, will become batel telikus, completely nullified to Hashem. Hoysa habriya ba'oifen, shegam koidem ha'avodah, tiye ba'nevroim kein hachana v'achshara, la'habitul shel yiful ha'idei avidasam. What the Rebbe is saying is, there needed to be something within the world itself, let's call it within the DNA of the world, even before the avodah, that's enabling, that's allowing the world to come to this level of bittul and the yid to come to this level of bittul through avodah. In other words, we don't start off that there's a world that's a whole yesh and a metzius and all of that. Now we need to nullify it. There needs to be within the world the ability that it could become batel, that it could become connected to Hashem in the greatest way. The Rebbe says this is really the reason why we start off with an oil that's completely beyond the worlds. And from this oil, we're then going to come down into an oil that has somewhat of a connection to the oil of Mois. It's because the oil of our world is coming from a place that's completely beyond the world. That's preparing the world, that's enabling the world to be able to be a place for Hashem. The Rebbe is going to explain how this works. So we're going to understand this by first prefacing what the Razal say. We quoted earlier the Mishnah that the world was created through 10 sayings, even though it could have been created in one saying. The Mishnah says further, what's the reason? The Mishnah says it's in order to punish the Rishoyim that are destroying a world that was created through 10 sayings, as opposed to a world that was created through only one saying. And to give reward, good reward to the tzaddikim that are keeping up the world that was created through 10 sayings, as opposed to keeping up a world that was only created through one saying. What does this mean? How do we understand this? This idea of the world would have been created or could have been created through one saying, and now it's created through 10 sayings, and how does that impact this idea of reward and punishment? If you do it's known the explanation regarding this. We said the world could have been created through one Maamar. Says the Rebbe, if the world would have been created and just through that one Maamar, it would have stayed that the world is created only through one Maamar, then the world wouldn't be a world as we have it today. The world would be a world that's completely batel, as the Rebbe is going to elaborate a little bit more right now in the brackets. But the point that Rebbe is going to make is that therefore, if the world is so batel, there wouldn't be the whole idea of free choice, and therefore no tzaddikim, rishoyim, punishment, reward, etc. In other words, the whole idea of the Asara Maamoris is in order to allow that the world should be able to feel itself as something independent. Says the Rebbe in the square brackets, Sharayafilu Olam HaBriya, because even the world of Bria, Shenishave me'amaymer de Bereshis, Shebesfiras HaMalchus, Eino Yesh Mamash. Umikol shkein be'im hoisa, Hayishavos me'amaymer echad, de Chochmo de Keser, V'alachas kama v'kama, Me'horatzon shalifnei atzimtzum, Sha'oz hayo ha'olam is betachlis habitl. So what the Rebbe is saying is, earlier on we mentioned already, that when it says the world could have been created from Maimer Echad, it doesn't mean it's only a theoretical thing, it could have been created. On a certain level, the world is created from that Maimer Echad, but then it develops and comes down into the further pratim. The Rebbe says, let's look at the world of Bria. The world of Bria is created, says the Rebbe, from this first Maimer of Bereshis. But earlier on, we also said that even in Bereshis itself, there's a number of different levels. There's Bereshis as one of the 10 sayings, as they are in Sfiras HaMalchus. Malchus is generally the Sfira associated with Dibur. And then there is also what the Rebbe refers to as the Maimer Echad, as it is in the higher worlds, or higher spheres than Malchus. Says the Rebbe, the world of Bria is created from the Maimer Echad, from Bereshis, but the way Bereshis is already part of Malchus. And because the world of Bria is created from this sphera, from this place, from this Maimer, it's already not a yesh in the same way as we know the concept of yeshus. So yes, the world of Bria is somewhat already of a metzias, but really there's still a tremendous level of bitul there. Says the Rebbe, how much more so if the world would have been created, not from the Bereshis of Malchus, but from the way it is in the higher spheres, Chochmo or Keser, or as we said earlier in the Maamar, from that Ratzon of Hashem, the desire of Hashem that's even before the Tzimtzum. If the world would have only been created from one of these places, the world would have had complete bittul, not feeling itself at all. Continuing after the brackets now. And therefore there wouldn't be this concept of free choice. If the world is bottle, then obviously there's no other option other than what Hashem wants. And therefore Hashem makes the Bria come about in a way of the individual Maamar, is the individual sayings. In other words, the idea being is that if it would be created from a higher oir, from a general oir, whether it's from the Asara Maamoris or from the higher places, so the greater that oir, the more bittul the world would experience. It's only because we narrowed down the oir, brought it down into the 10 individual sayings, that's why the things in this world can already start feeling themselves as if there's something outside of Hashem. And therefore the concept of free choice could come into the picture. The inyan schar v'oinish, as well as reward and punishment, as the Mishnah goes on. However, says the Rebbe, what would have happened if it only remains with the Asara Maamoris and we wouldn't have that klal? If there wouldn't be this idea of the world being created also on the level of klal. Says the Rebbe, if the world is created only through the Asara Maamoris, then the world sees itself as a completely separate Metzias outside of Hashem. To the extent that it could even go and choose something opposite of Hashem's Ratzain. In order that ultimately Hashem's purpose in creation should be fulfilled. Which is, that godliness should penetrate the world. Godliness should be revealed in the world. And the world itself should be bottled to Hashem. And this is why the system of how Hashem set up the world is that first there is the Maimer Echad. In other words, first there was injected in the world this idea of Maimer Echad, this idea of Elikus that's higher in the world, that causes a bittul in the world, that the world should be capable of being bottled. And then, out of this Maimer Echad, now come the individual Maamoris. What does that cause? That tells us that within the 10 Maamoris, within the 10 individual sayings, which is creating a very Gashmi, is like a world in front of us, that seems to be a Metzias for itself, But since they're all coming from that klal, since what first came is the general oir of Hashem, which is beyond the creation, therefore hidden inside these Maamoris, there's this Maamer Echad. And therefore, through the person's avodah, who megales a klal the Maamer Echad, is able to reveal that klal of that Maamer Echad. And the Maamer Echad again refers to many different levels. It could be referring to the Maamer Echad as it is in the sphere of Malchus, as we said, but then it goes higher and higher, all the way ad laharotan shlifnei atzimtzum. And he's able to reveal this deepest level of Hashem's Zohar, biho asara ma'amoris, into the 10 sayings, ubiho olam shenishavim, and into the world that was created through the 10 sayings, sheyegilu elikuz baha olam, that the world should have this revelation of godliness, v'sheyiyah batel elikus, and therefore that the world should have this level of bittul to Hashem. So this was the explanation, as the Rebbe put it, in regards to the asara ma'amoris. And again, asara ma'amoris on their own create a world, but the world would seem to be, as a world the way it is, that seems to be completely disconnected, not feeling a likus inside of it. It's because there's the cloud, the Maamer Echad, that precedes the asara ma'amoris, which is also really inside the world. It's just hidden and is behind the asara ma'amoris, which enables the world to have the bittul telikus. The Rebbe is now going to apply this also to this idea that we were speaking before about this great oir that's higher than having any shaychas to oilamois, and it's only from that oir that we're going to have the oir that is connected to the worlds. Says the Rebbe in Seif Zayin. This is going to explain to us also why Hashem originally makes it, that there should be this oir, which is called a Gilui Etzem, the revelation of the very essence, that's higher completely than the worlds. And it's only from this that we'll get down to the oir that has somewhat of a connection to the worlds. Because it's known that bittul that the world could experience, but based on the revelation of this oir that still has somewhat of a shaychas to olam mois, who rag bittul hayesh, is still always going to be restricted to what's called bittul hayesh. The world feels itself as a metzius, and it is nullifying itself to Hashem. Why is that? If it's an oir that has somewhat of a connection to the world, if it's an oir that is in some way going to be limited, restricted, defined by the world, that means the world, the oir itself is saying that this world has some sort of value. And therefore, any bittul that's going to come from the world, as a result of this oir, is never going to be the absolute bittul. A real absolute bittul, which means feeling oneself as completely nothing, this is only going to come as a result of this oir that's completely removed and beyond of having any connection to the world. In other words, that oir, the world is taking nothing. And therefore the bittul could be a bittul b'metzius. So now going back to why we needed that oir. And since the whole purpose is that the whole world should be bottled to Hashem with that greatest level of bittul b'metzius, that is the way that the world becomes a true place for Hashem. That's why we start off with this oir that's higher than the world's. And only then comes the oir that is somewhat connected to the world. The same logic that we said before about the asara ma'amoris. Is this way the world always contains also somewhat of that oir that's completely higher than the oilamos. This is similar to what's known. Yesh behelim loira kol hapratim sheyumshechu achar kach bi'akav elogam mepnimi yisoir shalamayla mishaychas lo'olam. As the Rebbe says, this is similar to the idea that it says that when the Eibishter removed all of his oir by that initial tzimtzum, so there was what's known as a reshima, like a little mark, a little impression, a little residue left over from that oir. But what's brought about this is that hidden in this reshima is, in a concealed way, is not only all the details that will later come out through the kav, through that one line or ray of light that shines through, but really it contains even all of the pnimi yisor that's totally not shaychus to the world. So this is the idea that we're saying here, that bottom line is that all of that oil that's completely higher than having a shaychus la'olamos is still here for the purpose of the oilamos, in order for the oilamos to have that bittul. Says the Rebbe Kam Mashal, the Rav and Talmud, like in the Mashal of the Rav and Talmud, Shebenakud as a seichel shel Rav, that in that point of the seichel of the Rav, Shenisher etzloi be'esat tzumtzum, that remains by the Rav when he's contracting all of his seichel. Yesh behelim kol hapratim sheyashpia achakach la Talmud. First of all, it has all of the details concealed, what he will later give over to the Talmud. Shenim shachim b'chitzoinis haseichel shel Rav, but this is all still with more related to the external part of the Rav, which is at least somewhat shaykh to the Talmud. But furthermore, v'gam pnimiyas haseichel shel Rav, really hidden in that is really even the pnimi is the inner part of the seichel of the Rav, which seemingly has nothing to do with the Talmud, but really it's also all hidden there as well. Says the Rebbe, Mekivan sha'apratim shenim shachim achar kach, ad leo asara ma'amari shemehem nivra olam b'poil. Heim loy inyan b'fnei atzmi, elo hapratim shel haklal, the maimer echad ad l'shar she'arishon, sheyesh boi behelam me'or shel ha'mayla mishaychas lo'elam. So now applying this back and connecting this all with that original greatest oil and the asara ma'amoris. So again, since in all of the things created in the world from the asara ma'amoris, they all really contain in it also the klal, also those highest levels of oil, even the ones that are completely higher than shaychas lo'elamos, really it contains all of that as well. Lochein al yidei ha'avoda, therefore it's possible that through avoda we could actually get there. Megalim bi asara ma'amoris, we could reveal within the asara ma'amoris, ube ha'olam shenivra mehem, and the world that's created from the asara ma'amoris. Loy rak ha'klal the maimer echad, not only that original klal, that original general idea of the Maimer Echad, of the one saying, which is already seemingly this greatest part of the oir, Elogam ha'oir shalamayla mishaychas lo'ilamos, but really, even the oir that's completely higher than having a shaychas lo'ilamos is also able to be brought down and be felt in the world, so that the world could have this bittul. Ubedugmas ha'mashal, the Rav Talmud, like in the mashal of the Rav Talmud, when the Talmud learns and studies in depth all of the details, eventually he could come to understand and to really get the das, the knowledge, the mind of his Rebbe. But what is he reaching? He's reaching to this deepest level of the very essence of the seichel of the Rav. And what is this cause? Going back to the Asara Ma'amoris, when the Yid is able to reveal not only the Maimer Echad. Our question was, who needs the Maimer Echad? And the reason we said there's a Maimer Echad is because there's an oir even higher than that, that's higher than having any Shaychas Lo'ilamos. Who needs that oir that's higher than Shaychas Lo'ilamos? Who needs the Maimer Echad? Why don't we just go to the Asara Ma'amoris? So we explained that the point of the Maimer Echad is because we wanted the world to be able to reach the level of bittul of that Maimer Echad. And not only of the Maimer Echad, but even the bittul that comes from the oil that's completely shaykh to Elamis, and therefore bittul b'metzias. Because by revealing this oil, this causes that the world could really experience this idea of absolute bittul, which we call bittul b'metzias. Now the Rebbe in Seif Ches is going to take it a step further than that even. Says the Rebbe, on a deeper level, we could say the following. When we deal with the details, that's the details of the Asara Ma'amoros, the details that came as a result of that in our world. Till now we said we get to the Maimer Echad. We said we could get to the oil that's even higher than the oil mois. But now the Rebbe is going to take it a step further than that. Magim, says the Rebbe, lebchinas etzem oir, to the very essence of that oir, shalamaylo gam meya oir shalamaylo meya oilamis, which is even higher than the oir that's higher than the worlds. Sheyeshnei behelim ba'klal oilamis. We said before that there's an oir that's completely higher than the worlds, but are at least found in a concealed way in the klal. But now we're saying we're going to be speaking about the etzem oir, which is even higher than that. The Rebbe explains. That which we said that could be found in a concealed way, in the klal, hu bechinas, is the level which we called hispashtus oir. His pashtus oir means, in other words, already the way, the oir, yes, it's before the tzimtzum and all of that, but it's already what we call the extension or the spreading of the light. As it says, that initially, before the creation of the world, the oir ein soif was filling the whole cholol, the whole void or hollow space where the world is eventually going to be. All of space was originally filled by oir ein soif. This oir, although it's completely higher than the oilamos, this is the oir that's going to need to have its simtzum, and then we're going to get to the klal and the prat and all these things that we said. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, this oir is already called some sort of revelation. It's only within this oir that we say, now there's going to be the desire to create, and there's going to be the tzimtzum and all of that. Hare, sha'ashaychas the rotzen la'oilamos, haklal the oilamos b'shar shayarishain, la'oir habli gvul shalamayla ma'oilamos, hirak la'oir shemavchinas ispashtos v'gilui. So therefore, says the Rebbe, so far what we're speaking about is that yes, we have this first klal of the oilamos in its very highest form, and we say that the shaychus of this oir that's somewhat connected to the worlds, to that oir abli gvul, it's higher than the oilamos, but is to which level is only rak lo oir shemavchinas ispashtos v'gilui. Even that is only to an oir which is somewhat revealed already and spread out already, etc. But still not the essence. Vayidaber protim magim la'etzem oir. But dafka through dealing with the details, the asara Maamar and that which come out of it, here we're going to get to something that's completely higher than oir. We're getting to the very etzem of the oir. How do we understand this? If you're in, who says that the explanation is, we have a general idea, a general rule, which is explained a lot in Chassidus, and the Rebbe is going to give some examples for this. The shoirish haprat hu l'mayla me'aklal. Up until this point of the Maamar, it sounded like the klal is the greater one, the general rule, and out of that come the details. The details are seemingly lower than the klal. But the Rebbe says, in truth, the prat is rooted somewhere even higher than the klal. And the Rebbe gives some examples. The Rebbe is first going to give an example of Chochmah and Bina. Then the Rebbe is going to give an example of speech, of Dibur. Even though Chochmah is the general idea from which all the details of Bina will come out. But nevertheless, says the Rebbe, this point itself tells us that Shoirish HaBina hi l'mayla mishoirish HaChochmah. That Bina, the root of Bina, is really even higher than Chochmah. Where could we see this? How is this expressed? Therefore, it's dafka as a result of getting into the details, examining the details of Bina. Sometimes new ideas come out, new ideas are discovered, which weren't even in that initial Chachma. So what do we see from here? That dafka in the pratim came out something higher than the klal. In Bina came out something even more than Chachma. Another example. The same thing is true with speech. Now again, speech is taking that which you had in your mind and breaking it down into many more details now. When the speech comes down, when the seichel, the intellect comes down into speech, many more details are added now. Even more than you had in Bina. And furthermore, even after Bina went through the process already of coming into machshava. So Dibur is much more details than machshava. The mashachosh from the machshava achas in Diburu meshach zman. So in thought, you could have one quick thought which covered a lot of area, but to verbalize all of that, to say it all, will take much longer. And the reason for this is why are there suddenly new ideas coming out specifically when you can have Dibur. First of all, you have more details, but it's also, as we'll see, new ideas will come out that you didn't even have before, is again for the same reason. The shoirish hadibur, because the source of Dibur is even higher than Bina. And this is why we see that a person is learning something, and when he verbalizes it, new ideas he's now getting. He's now discovering new ideas within this understanding that he didn't have even originally when he was thinking about it. Even when he was experiencing Bina, which already we said is more than Chachma. The Rebbe now applies this to Rav and Talmud. The same thing is true when the Rav is giving over to the Talmud. And again, you would think that the Rav definitely has it much better, much more than the Talmud. But really, and specifically by the fact that the Rav is giving it over with many, many details right now. Especially when he has to give it over to a Talmud that's considered a very small Talmud compared to this Rav. The and the smaller or younger the Talmud is. You're going to need the Rav is going to need to take the seichel and break it down even more. But what happens? The Rav is now gaining so much more than what he had previously before he had given it over. As we have in the Gemara that says, that he gained from his Talmidim more than he gained from his teachers, more than he gained from his Chaverim. Ubefrat, says the Rebbe, and this is specifically true, when the Talmud starts questioning what the Rav is teaching him. In order to answer, in order to remove the questions, this itself is bringing out much greater depth within the Rav himself. So again, all of this mashal was coming to show us the idea, which the Rebbe is going to tie choose in a minute, explicitly. The Rebbe is going to explain this idea that it's dafka as a result of dealing with the Asara Mamoris in our world, where we're going to get to an oir that's so much higher than any of the oiros, even of the highest form, the highest nature. Says the Rebbe, so the same thing is true with the Asara Mamoris. Even though the 10 sayings are seemingly just details of the original Maamar Echad, it's dafka because they are the details. Since we said before, the source of the prat is even higher than the klal, as per the examples we just gave. That's why it's specifically through the avoida in the world, in a world that was created, so a world that was created through 10 sayings. Ubefrat, and especially, the Rebbe is taking the mashal of the Rav and Talmud and showing us 2 points. First of all, we said by the Rav and Talmud, the fact that he has to bring it down into more details, that itself adds to the Rav. And then we said, especially if the Talmud asks questions. Applying this in the world, says the Rebbe, first of all, we have the Asara Maamar, the world that's created through 10 sayings, already making the world into a yesh. Especially that there's now the choice to choose the opposite, which is similar to the idea of asking questions on the seichel of the Rav. But it's specifically through all of this. Magiyim l'maylo yoyser mebchinas haklal. The oilam, the Maamar Echad, we come even higher than that Maamar Echad of the world. And furthermore, as we said before, we come even to the very essence of the oir. It's even higher than that oir, which we call the hispashtus oir, the oir in which Hashem is kvayochel, that's where he's having the desire to create the world, and that's the oir that's going to have the tzimtzum and all of that. And yet, through dealing with the Asara Mamoritz in the world where we have it today, we're coming to a higher level, to the etzim of that oir. Until this point of the Maamar, over the last few seifim, the Rebbe was mainly dealing with the way the Eibishter is creating the world through the Asara Mamoris and the Klal, and we're going beyond the Klal and beyond even the Oir that's higher than the Oilamois. Now the Rebbe is going to show the same idea within Torah. Seif Tes. The same thing is true when we come to the way Torah comes about. Since, as we said in the beginning of the Maamar, first there too you have first the Klal, and then the Protim. Then these details that come out are not independent and outside of the Klal. These details are coming from the Klal. And therefore, the what's the Rebbe saying? We asked the question before, who needs the klal first and then come to the pratim? Why don't we just get straight to the pratim? We gave a mashal of a Rav and Talmud, and the Rebbe wasn't completely satisfied, it didn't fully answer, because by the Eibishter could definitely go straight to the pratim. By the Asara Maamoris, we answered that the point was, the Eibishter wants that within the detailed Asara Maamoris, we should be able to feel that cloud, that greater oir, that's higher than the Asara Maamoris. So the Rebbe is now saying the same thing in regards to Torah. What the Eibishter wants is that we should be able to feel in the details of Torah Shabbal Peh, or even to Kol Mash Thomas Vasuk Asar L'Chadash, we should always be able to feel this greater oir, the oir of a klal, the way it's in Torah Shebeksav, or even in the Aseres HaDibros. The Adla klal, the Aseres HaDibros. Shalimut Kol Pratsha B'Torah Be'emu V'Yiru B'Reses U'B'Ziyah K'may Shoyi Beis Amidas Aseres HaDibros. On a practical level, that means that when we're learning Torah, may it be any part of Torah, we're learning it with the same fear, with the same awe, with the same trembling, as it was by the Aseres HaDibros. We feel in every word of Torah, this is the word of Hashem. And not only of the Aseres HaDibros, but going back to the further klal, the Adla klal, the Dibur Echad Shabbai Nichlalu Kol Aseres HaDibros, all the way to the Aseres HaDibros, we said we're also originally as one klal, as one Dibur. So the idea is that it's originally said as one klal, so that later in every part of Torah we feel how that part of Torah is also part of this klal, and feeling that tremendous level of Hashem's oir in every part of Torah that we have. Says the Rebbe via Seira Mizu, just like we said by the world, that by getting into the details we ultimately reach a level of oir that's way, way, way beyond any shaykhs to the worlds. In a similar way, we're going to say now, similarly over here, Davka by working hard, toiling, putting in effort in the details of Torah Shabbal Peh, we reach even higher than the klal. And this is what it says, this is why the expression is, anything that a Talmud Vasik will come up as a chidush. What's this idea of chidush? Because through putting in the effort and toil in Torah, so if we are able to draw down, we're able to tap into, to bring from the deepest level in the source of Torah, the way it is rooted in the Helam Atzmi of Ein Sof, in other words, in the deepest concealed level of the Ein Sof, the way he's higher than any revelations. Which is higher than the level of Torah, the way it came down in a revealed way. That's the Pshat L'Chadash. In other words, there's the Torah the way it was revealed up until now, and now the Talmud Vasik is coming up with a new idea that was completely on the deepest levels of concealment. V'zeu yogaiti umatzasi. Yogaiti umatzasi, you work hard, and then you succeed, you find. What is the idea of matzasi? The inyan mitzia, the idea of finding something, matzasi, hu shemoitze davar chadosh, you found something new, that you never even imagined. Like literally finding a object that was completely, you didn't have your mind in it at all. And that's the meaning of yogaiti umatzasi. Because through toiling in Torah, we find and reveal in yonim chadashim new ideas. Until finally, through toiling in Torah, especially in the Pnimis HaTorah, which is similar to the Torah of Mashiach, and is somewhat part of that already. Nizke, through all of this, will be Zoicha Legili Torah Mashiach, to the revelation of the Torah of Mashiach. Who about him? It also says that it comes like in a way where a person was not expecting it in any way like that, like a Metzia. Shababa Hesach Hadas, as it says, Matzasi David Avdi. Matzasi Davka, so it's again this idea of Metzia. Sha'azi Gili Atzmus Eir Sof B'li Levush, that's going to be the revelation of the greatest level of the Gili of the Eir Sof without any coverings. V'achagam Agili B'shas Matan Torah, to the extent that even the Gili of Matan Torah, we say, Hayarak Me Ein Agili D'Los, it was only somewhat similar to what's going to be when Mashiach comes, which will all be, of course, Bevias Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'Karev Mamash.